Welcome to the next episode of Navigating Carbon, your compass to carbon management. As always, I'm your host, Deb Ryan, and in this episode, I sat down with Liz Dennett, and we tackle a topic that I haven't yet discussed on this podcast, critical minerals. Liz is the founder and CEO of Endolith, a clean tech startup that is harnessing the power of microbes to make the mining of critical minerals more efficient. Liz and I talk about the importance of critical minerals as we look to electrify everything, and how Endolith's technology can be used and deployed, and how that has a huge impact on increasing production, particularly of copper and lithium, these so-called critical minerals, because of the critical role they play in electrifying everything. Liz also talks about her journey to CEO. So if you're interested in hearing her story, make sure you listen through to the end. As always, if you enjoy our conversation, please make sure you like the podcast. And if you want to stay on top of all upcoming episodes, please make sure you subscribe. But for now, sit back and enjoy my conversation with Liz. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Navigating Carbon. Today, we are going to talk about critical minerals, which I'm really excited about because it's a topic we haven't dived into on this particular podcast. And I have the best person to talk about critical minerals, Liz Dennett. Excuse me, Liz, how are you?
I am so excited to be here. It's funny you mentioned critical minerals. If you ever happen to be sitting next to me on a plane at jury duty and you bring up, oh, what do you do? Oh, critical minerals. I will talk to you about it. I actually had an Uber driver, Lyft driver recently, and we got into the very deep cuts, not superficial, like, yeah, critical minerals are important, but like, hey, let's talk about child labor practices in the DRC and slavery. And it's an important thing to talk about. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to geek out about things that are top of mind to me.
I love it. No, I did it because it is a really important topic, and we'll see where we get to today. And if we can't cover everything, we'll have you back, and we can dive deeper as we keep going. But you're the founder and CEO of a company called Endolith. Explain to everybody what Endolith does, what you guys do.
So yeah, we are using, my tagline used to be, we're harnessing microbes to fuel sustainable mining, but it's actually a lot deeper than that. And as a startup, we're relatively early stage. I'm always thinking about how to very crisply describe these very nuanced scientific concepts. So we essentially merge microbiology and data science and some techniques like adaptive laboratory evolution to get more copper and a little bit more lithium out of low-grade ores to essentially make mining more efficient, scalable, sustainable, and turn these waste resources into actual critical minerals we can use. If you're wondering, okay, that's cool, but like, why copper? Why does this matter? Well, I'm about to say some things that may now live rent-free in your head and keep you awake at night. Between now and 2050, we are going to need more copper than has ever been mined or used in the history of human civilization. Now, to put that in perspective, that includes the Bronze Age. That includes everything our ancestors have ever done. Whenever you're in a museum and look at all those beautiful artifacts, when you think about all of the grid that is powering your charger, your supercharger, when you turn on a light, everything that exists today, we're going to need more than that in the next 25 years. And there's a few reasons for that. Copper is the best non-precious metal. So when you flip a light switch, those electrons got to go somewhere. Also, wind turbines need an immense amount of copper. Electric cars need an immense amount of copper. Anytime you're relying on electricity, it's copper all the way down. It's not turtles all the way down. It's copper.
Copper. It's not turtles. It's copper.
Yeah.
Excuse me, my voice is doing something funny. I mean, that's it. This is a staggering kind of number. And like, you know, you talk about like mining practices and some of that kind of stuff. But I think the piece that I think a lot of people might not appreciate is that, you know, the low grade ores and stuff like that, like what kind of like when we just mine for copper, you know, what are we talking about in terms of recovery and like,
yeah,
like that? And what kind of improvement are you guys seeing with the work you're doing with Endolith?
So that's great questions and a few pieces to unpack. So the easy to get to ores, the things where you kind of look at them and you're like, hey, that contains copper. Our ancestors have long since used all that. So around 70% of what's left are in low-grade ores. And when I say low-grade, I am talking 0.25% copper. These are contained in things like chalcopyrite, which happens to be one of my personal favorites. The way that we extract it is a process called hydrometallurgy. You take it, you crush it into these very fine grain particles, you pile it massively, and you essentially use a sprinkler system of sulfuric acid. that creates a bunch of chemical reactions. It changes the EH, it changes the pH. Excuse me, I have a PhD in geomicrobiology. I will nerd out about this. But if everything goes well, you get about half of that copper out for a lot of reasons. And so what we do is we deploy the world's oldest miners, these little microbes, and we send them on their way in this pH 1, pH 2 sulfuric acid solution, and they're able to mine more of that copper. Initially, we were thinking, hey, maybe we can get 10% more. And we're still thinking in the field, if we can get 10% more, we're doing great. But we have done some work recently with BHP, and we have found that we are actually seeing between 1.7 and 1.9 times greater recovery. So we're getting about double the amount of copper out, which is awesome.
It's huge.
Lab scale testing, we still have to go to the field, but these microbes are incredibly resilient. They're wonderful, and there's a reason they've been at it for billions of years.
That's really cool. That's a huge improvement. And like when we think about, again, being able to do some of these things, more sustainably and to be able to be more efficient with what we're doing, that is amazing. Like, really cool. So the impact, you talked about the actual what they're doing in terms of the recovery of copper and lithium and stuff like that. When we think about the environmental footprint of mining and things like that, are you seeing an improvement in that space as well because of this increase in efficiency, or is that more of a secondary kind of thing?
That is a very complex question. Our ethos, and we're a very value-driven company, as a startup, I've had a pretty long career. I did a PhD, 12 years ago. I've done a lot of things in my life. I've had the privilege to work at big companies, small companies, and there's a really cool baton that gets handed to you when you're in charge. And there's essentially a blank piece of paper where you get to write the company's values. You get to show up to work every single day and decide how the company operates. What are your key values? I always tell investors, safety is number 1, critical feedback is number 2, snacks is number 3, but it's actually a lot more nuanced than that, like so many things in life. One of our big ethos is if we can mine once and mine right and maximize what we are getting, that means the tailings, the waste is minimized. When we are taking advantage of these natural resources, we want to do it and make sure that we can do it in the best way and get the maximum recovery. I grew up in a little town in Alaska, and growing up in a place where you have this very sharp dichotomy of giant mountains, natural resources. I grew up fishing and camping. My dad worked for an oil and gas company. Many of my parents' family members worked at Red Dog Mine. And so you have this very sharp understanding. And a lot of my friends were Native Alaskans. And so we talked about this, like, how do you reconcile being good stewards of the land with also using these resources? There was a bumper sticker I remember seeing as a kid saying, if it can't be grown, it must be mined. Because we need this copper, and you cannot recycle your way into net more copper. We ultimately need more. Yeah. And then it comes down to, well, why do we need more? Is this a part of an expanding middle class? Do we really need more copper? And as a scientist, I love to go into the primary literature and look at who actually benefits from grid electrification. Is it just people like me that can afford faster electric cars and I can pass people on the freeway? And the answer is actually no, it's not. It is a lot of the developing countries. So there's been a lot of work in Bangladesh, for instance, looking at grid stability and what happens when we get more grid stability. And the two populations that tend to benefit the most from this bulk increase in copper are women and children. Women have access to educational outcomes. They can go to school. They can learn. And children, surprisingly enough, don't die because they have access to better healthcare systems and they have access to better healthcare in general. And so you see child mortality go down. So that actually puts a lot of it in perspective.
Yeah, it really does. And particularly given then the scale of this sort of like enormous volume that we're chasing as a globe. That's amazing. So we've talked about copper, and you mentioned briefly at the top lithium as well. So explain like what's going on in the lithium space and some of that kind of stuff, because that's one that often gets a lot of attention because of how it's actually mined and processed and stuff like that as well.
So this is actually really unique and pretty cool. We have a joint development agreement with Arizona Lithium. And we're focused on US domestic, I guess that's redundant, US and domestic. We're focused on domestic lithium clay production. So most lithium in the United States is in clay deposits. And to get that clay out, you typically need acid leaching at high temperatures. Processing that ore can be really expensive. It can be very chemically invasive, and it hasn't been widely commercialized yet. When you think of other ways to get lithium out, you may think of these giant brine fields where they just evaporate everything. But this lithium clay, things like Thacker Pass, if you're a geologist, they have some very unique geology, some very unique mineralogy. And so what we do is we set these little microbial miners to work. They produce natural acids, organic acids. They produce enzymes that can break down the lithium clays more efficiently, so that instead of relying on these pretty harsh acids, we can rely on these microbes to keep producing these acids. And so with that, we've developed a pretty unique pre-treatment process, and we're working all along the flow sheet in the value chain to plug and play that. From just a selfish perspective, I think it's pretty cool to be able to have field sites and support our neighbors where we can drive on site.
That's awesome. And the thing that you talk about domestically, like, the US, I don't know if people are aware, but like the US doesn't produce a lot of these metals ourselves. And so, when we're relying on places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is where a lot of this stuff comes from, being able to do these things more efficiently, where we know the practices, we know what's going on, and
Exactly.
we're doing it, here in the US, or, even if it's in Australia or Canada or wherever it is, and not having that reliance on places that, might not have the same kind of regulations and things like that as well is huge to be able to be really efficient there.
Yeah. And also from just like living in 2025 America, how you can be a part of whatever administration comes in, how you can kind of stake your claim and be like, well, we want to be a force for a climate positive solution. We want to get more of these critical minerals that you need. You could stop pretty much anyone on the street and be like, hey, is lithium important to the energy transition? And they would be like, yeah, lithium batteries, this is important. Copper tends to be a little more esoteric, but lithium you can point to and be like, hey, is more domestic lithium supply a good thing? And universally being able to write your own future, to navigate that. Also, domestic jobs are pretty awesome as someone that works in America. But we've seen geopolitical headwinds change. We've also seen how having America be able to produce more of its bulk natural resources has really changed the political landscape. Geopolitics are immensely complicated, but having that bulk supply has changed a lot of the supply and demand curves. If you look at things like onshore unconventional oil and gas production, that has been a complete game changer in terms of how America has been able to show up in a geopolitical natural resource landscape. So enabling that from a lithium perspective and seeing that potentially play out over the next 10, 25 years, I'm very excited to at least have some little microbial part moving that forward.
Which is awesome. And then because what you're doing, should increase the efficiency and therefore, like you said, get more out of, a smaller mine or smaller area and stuff like that. One of the issues that, all developing nations have struggled with in their resource development, whether it be mining or oil and gas that you talk about, is this concept of not in my backyard, or the NIMBYism and stuff, or the NIMBY kind of concept.
Yes.
Do you see that the conversation that you guys are having with people here in the US domestically, because of the efficiency, is like, is it helping and stuff, or is there still some of that sort of balance and stuff like that? It's such a huge challenge we face in the developed world when we develop resources.
I think it's kind of a two-prong approach. So living in Denver, having a lot of friends, and I recently moved here. So going out to make friends and telling them, oh, I work in mining. A lot of the gut reaction is, oh, that's dirty. How could you work in mining? That's so bad. And my initial gut reaction is like, yes, in my backyard. What do you mean that's bad? Where do you think grid electrification comes from? Where do you think all of this clean energy that we're getting comes from? If we are not doing it here and we are not shepherds of the way that we want these things to be treated, then what's going to happen? Of course I want it in my backyard. Of course I want to embrace it, because so living in Colorado, we have a lot of mines adjacent to us. And I recently had the privilege of tagging along with one of my former grad school friends who's now a professor at Eastern Michigan. And he led this road trip, a bunch of his geology students. We got to see the Molly Kathleen gold mine. We got to look out at Newmont's massive gold mine. And the students were just like, oh, this is so bad. And I was like, no, this is so good because you are seeing it. The citizens and the residents here can make sure that it's treated the way it should be in terms of end of mine and end of life. That's in our backyard. We can make sure that we are being good stewards of the land and of the environment. It's not like when you go onto Amazon or to some website and you just, I want this tomorrow because it's so obfuscated. You don't realize what it is.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
it's,
I love that.
it's, I've often joked around like we should have a mining yes in my backyard, because if we are going to be developing these resources, which I think everyone agrees that we need, they help global citizens, they really help everyone. Who do you want to be the person on the front line making sure they're done right? Do you want it to be you? Do you want it to be someone like you? Or do you want it to be someone that is an unknown quantity? And I felt this way when I first started my career after my PhD and I came into oil and gas. I worked for a big oil and gas company. And a lot of my more like quote unquote environmentalist friends were like, how could you do that? You're selling your soul to an oil and gas company. And I was like, whoa, time out. You do not understand this. I am helping this oil and gas company to do things in a more efficient way. I looked at some really cool projects like screenouts, like efficiency, help them ultimately use less water. It was a way to not just be an academic who would throw ideas out there and say, someone should do something about this, but like, hey, here's a way we can be more aligned with our environmental goals. We can save water. We can work with local communities and it saves money. Let's do it. And for me, understanding that everything in life is gray. I think I've said a few times, like, it's dependent, it's nuanced. Life is nuanced. Embrace that and figure out how you can be a force for good.
I love that. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier about, growing up in Alaska and like being, finding that balance. And I think it's a theme that I hear a lot of like, how do we find that balance in the work we're doing, the conversations we're having, like all this kind of stuff. So, which is really cool. So you talked a little bit about moving out of the lab and field testing and stuff. So what's Endolith's, what's next for Endolith?
So much exciting stuff. We have some really exciting announcements that'll be coming out. I feel like this is what you have to do on a podcast. It's just like tee up like an influencer. Oh, stay tuned. We have some very exciting stuff. We are moving to the field this year. We have some announcements with big mining companies. We're already publicly working with BHP, with Rio Tinto. And then in the next few years, we are all into first commercial deployments. So we've had some incredible results, incredible customer traction. And one part of our platform I didn't talk about too much is it's not just the microbes. It's not just how the microbes respond, but we got into TechCrunch Disrupt last year. And if you've ever seen the TV show Silicon Valley, we, as a scrappy little startup, we're like, hey, we should do like a little montage moment and show up to TechCrunch Disrupt with the SaaS platform. So I called in some favors to some of the best front-end engineers I've ever worked with. I was a solution architect at AWS for a few years, leading energy data platforms. So I know my way around the cloud. I've built some pretty crazy cool platforms. And so at the time, pretty much over the course of 4 or 5 weeks and on a whim, we built a web front-end SaaS platform that would bring our microbial data together, a bunch of other data together, and allow us to optimize and help our workflows by really bringing this data together. We could connect it to field data, connect it with data systems, and it's really become a biological intelligence backbone for everything we are doing. And what I mean by that in particular, as I mentioned, we're using the world's oldest miners. These microbes have been around for billions and billions of years. We're using microbial communities. We have to change the microbes that go in over time. There's a big adaptive laboratory evolution component. And so we're able to come up with our shortcomings since we don't have billions of years, but these microbes have had billions of years. We need them with this cloud computing power so we can kind of see it some kind of dichotomous timescales. And that's another thing we've been actively working on building out.
That's really cool. That's awesome. So lots to look forward to, and people can check it out on your website and LinkedIn and look for all those announcements, which is really cool to see. And then just as we wrap up, like one of the things I know you and I've spent a lot of time talking about is your journey, and you've alluded to it sort of through here, from geologist, through to startup CEO and stuff like that. Like, give us a little bit of an overview about, for those that are really thinking about this journey and are like, I want to be like Liz, like, what are some of your biggest learnings, the things that you've been the most proud of? Like, tell us a little bit about that journey.
I do want to joke and be like, no one should be like, I want to be like Liz, but
Everyone wants to be like Liz.
I actually have had a few 7 to 10-year-old girls stop me and be like, your hair is amazing. Your nails are amazing. I want to be like you when I grow up. Are you a mermaid? And I'm like, some days I feel like it. So I that resonates with me. And I know you and I have talked about this so many times. The one thing I don't think I've shared before much, and I've been reflecting on a lot, is you guys know this, you've heard parts of my story, is I grew up in a little town in Alaska, got a master's and PhD in astrobiology at Wisconsin-Madison. I've done some incredible things since then. I've worked with some incredible team members. But a big part that I've been recently reflecting on is a lot of how I've grown up as an elder millennial in this world is really being socialized to rely on external validation, to follow the rules. And all of my jobs before this, my success was that end of year performance review where they'd pull you in and be like, do you meet or exceed expectations? How are you doing? How does everyone around you think you're doing? How are you doing? And there's so much of that I've spent my time as a CEO unpacking and really just like wadding up and throwing away.
Love it.
So a core part of that is I realized excuse me here, but part of you, if you want to change the world, you can't give a fuck. You have to be feral. You have to have that realization where you look around and are like, hey, some of these systems are broken. Some of these companies are moving too slowly. I am impatient. I've been waiting my whole life to jump in. Now is the time. If I don't do it now, I'm not getting any younger. I have the energy now. Yes, I'm this overachieving, nerdy woman that's always been taught that I'm relying on these things, but F it. Forget what I'm supposed to do. Not everyone has to like me. I can be me. I can lead. And I'm just going to look inward for validation. And if at the end of the day, only 15% of people I meet like me, okay, that's fine. And to me, to say that out loud is completely mind-blowing. But at the same time, I know that Endolith is on the forefront of changing mining. It's not just an idea. It's becoming part of this bigger movement. And I don't need anyone else to give me permission to be okay with it. So to answer your question, if you are wondering how to be more X, Y, or Z, like be more fearless, be more feral, just use that internal compass that you have and really think about a lot of that programming that, especially if you're between the ages of 35 and 45, you've probably really been fed that you need this external validation. So go feral, go inward.
I love it. That is such good advice for everybody. And I'm sure people are going to reach out and want to be like all like Liz and learn how to do this and stuff like that. So,
or they'll be like, actually, you're right. I don't like you. You are too loud. You're too brash. You are too. And I'll be like, okay, I'm sorry that you feel that way. And that's fine.
Well,
when I did this accelerator, one of the advice that someone was giving us about fundraising was like, hey, only 25% of the people you speak to have to like you. It's better for people to either like you or not like you than to be forgettable. And everyone else in the room was like, yeah, that checks out. And I was, what do you mean? Everyone has to like me. I love being likable. And all the guys in there who were mostly in their late 20s were like, I don't care. I just came out of these awesome programs. I'm good. And I was like, wow.
I love that. So yeah, so the takeaways is just be yourself, lean into the things that you love and be yourself and be a little bit feral. I love that.
Give yours. Wow.
Oh.
How we're going to go, but there we go.
Well, Liz, with that, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation and such an important part of the conversation as we talk about, like you said, energy transition and where we're going in the future, as well as, you know, the people that are going to run the companies that change the world. So,
and these are the people that I want to be around and the people I want in my spheres. If you guys are keen to learn more about Endolith, reach out to me or any of us on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is pretty much the one social media platform I have. Or if you see a tall woman with shades of purplish blue hair that vaguely looks like a mermaid and is talking about copper, it's probably me. If you're in the greater Denver area to hear that, it's probably me.
Probably Liz. It's probably Liz. Yeah. I love that. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Liz. And we'll chat soon.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, Deb.